What's up? What's up? The Motive Zone. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, Tiffany Clark, and I am with a very special guest. Kevin is not here today, guys. He had to work out of town, and so it's just us today. Julius
We love you, Kevin.
Mina. Yes, we do love Kevin.
Yeah, it is.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to
you.
the Motive Zone. Thank you for joining us today, Julius.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Um, Julius works for the U.S. Census Bureau,
I do.
and he's coming to kick some knowledge about why this 2020 census is very important to all of us.
All of us.
All of us.
We're about to come to our census.
We're about to come to our census.
There it is.
Exactly. So, Julius, I don't know if you know this, but usually we give a little recap. This month of October was Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And so we spent the entire month basically talking about domestic violence and, a lot of things that can be signs in new relationships that people need to look out for. So last week we talked about red flags that, you need to look out for sometimes in relationships, like internet stalking and trying to control conversations and, all those things that can seem cute in the beginning. You allow somebody to talk all the time and whatever, and you like when somebody's paying a lot of attention, to you online. So it's cute in the beginning, but then over time it can snowball into something else and become a greater issue. And so we talked about those things and tried to warn the people on things to look out for in relationships.
And I know, because I watched it.
You
It was
did.
amazing.
Thank you.
And I know you guys also touched on toxic male masculinity and the role it
And
plays
toxic
in
femininity.
the culture and how we excuse some things that we should not. And
That's
a lot
true.
of brothers don't keep each other accountable the way we should. So it was an amazing show. So shout out for that episode. Y'all need to watch it.
Thank you, episode 15. And so we're just going to get right into it with the motive of the day. Thank you, PJ. So, the motive of the day today is going to be about positioning ourselves to succeed. I feel like oftentimes we spend so much time focusing on our day-to-day lives, our work, and we have passions. We have things that we're interested in. There are other things that we can bring our attention to, but because we're so focused on work, we don't do that. And so I just want to speak to the people, the good people, and just offer up a suggestion of putting as much effort into your personal passions as you do into your work. So, some of us go to work 8 hours a day, but we're not really doing much, right? Some of us. And a lot of us are really going hard in the workplace. But when we get off work, we don't have any time for ourselves. And so I would like to encourage all of you to spend as much time as you can focusing on things that you're interested in. So if you spend 8 hours a day at work, 4 hours or whatever you do, when you come home from work, at least take the time, 30 minutes of your day, at least, to focus on something that you're passionate about. And my suggestion is to do that every day for 30 days and see how you feel about yourself after that 30 days. And once you determine how you feel about yourself after the 30 days, go ahead and do it again for 2 months and then 3 months, and then continue to pursue the things that you're passionate about. Because I realize that a lot of us, we can get so discouraged, or we feel complacent. We feel like we're stuck in a kind of rut because we're so busy working for somebody else. I know that I've had that same sentiment, that feeling over time. Like, what am I doing? Like, what is my purpose here? And it's because I spent so much of my focus and my purpose every day was to go to work and do whatever it is that I had to do for the job, not really thinking that I'm spending so much time turning on, like code switching into this role for somebody else, as opposed to really being myself for myself and investing in myself in the same way that I would in my profession. And Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what other people can do for you or what it is that these other companies can do for you. It's about investing in yourself and having your own personal equity to rely on at the end of the day.
And I love that, but I think I always ask people, who taught you that the 9 to 5 was the only model to live your life, right?
Right.
Like, we went to class 8 hours a day.
Right.
This factory model, you need to break through that, because in order for you to truly be who you're called to be, it can't be the 9 to 5. Granted, you could twerk it out, right? you could work that 9 to 5 as a way to still do other things, but to be honest, who actually puts in 8 hours work a day?
Mm-hmm.
Like who?
Right.
People have built whole empires while they're sitting 8 hours a day and then broken free, right? So I think the goal is freedom.
The goal is
whatever that
freedom.
looks like for you.
Yeah, so I was watching an interview with Byron Allen, and he said, a couple of quotables, well, a whole lot of quotables, because he's like the man.
Yep.
And he said, that there is a matrix going on here, and we have to crack the code. And I'm just going to add to that and say, in order to live in our highest power and thrive in our deepest purpose. And so, people are going to, the world is positioned or built, to dismiss you, discredit you, demonize you, and try to destroy you. But when you invest in your own personal equity, you cannot be destroyed.
That's really real. And when I used to teach, I used to say, why do you think the world is trying to destroy you? Put you down, right? Black people, people of color, right? It's because we are powerful.
We are powerful.
Beyond measure. And I think there's a reality that keeps us in that 9 to 5 shackle, right? Because if we were to truly break free into our creativity and truly get back to that original way of just living, I think that's what the world is scared of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that interview was something else. It was on the Breakfast Club. Shout out to them. I'm a huge fan. And he was on it, they basically putting people on the game about just the world, And what I found interesting about it is what I thought about is when I was thinking about the motive of the day is that investing in yourself is also putting yourself on game, investing in your knowledge, learning about your community, not just the people in your community and what you see in the micro, but on a macro scale, understanding on a strategic level, what's happening in your community, because and really taking time to not only understand it, but also take action against things that you don't particularly agree with or understand or whatever it is. And that involves, which we're going to get into shortly. It involves basically, making your presence known. Like you said, we are powerful beyond measure, but we are still being dismissed.
Absolutely.
We are still being discredited. We're still being demonized. We're still being destroyed. And so we have to really take it upon ourselves to, position ourselves and be seen. And the real way to do that, well, not the real way. I want to say a smart way to do that is to invest in your education and understanding, like I said, understanding how the world works and what is really working against us. And one of the things that has been working against people of color, Black people, is the census.
It is. And so before we get to that, the other thing is also we have to be strategic, right? Right. There's systems that have been working against us for years.
Yeah, right.
We can't break it in a day, but we can sit down and strategize for 5 years and say, you know what, we can break it in 10 years. Right. And I think sometimes we have a short-sighted vision of how long there's been forces against us.
Right.
And to your point about the census, the decennial census done every 10 years, we're not involved, right?
Right.
A lot of us don't even know why it matters.
Right.
We hear about it, we're like, eh.
Yeah, so we're gonna, and before we really get into that, I just want to say, this is our world, right? Yep. Why are we not taking control of it? And the best way to take control of it is to strategize. And like I said, strategizing involves investing in yourself.
Yep.
And really making sure that you know everything that you need to know, because I feel like that's one of the reasons why, it's like we take 2 steps forward and find ourselves flailing.
Yep.
Flailing. You know, and that's why we find ourselves in the matrix and, you know, in the humdrum, in the rat race of working and not feeling validated and valued and appreciated, and we're not being promoted. And, you know, this is why. It's because we don't have control. And, you know, just segued into real talk.
Real talk.
Real talk. Like Julius mentioned, this you know, the census is very important. Like I mentioned when we introduced him, he works for the U.S. Census Bureau.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so can you tell the people, the good people, a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So the first thing I have to say is that I'm not here on an official capacity.
He's not here on official capacity.
Everything that I say is my opinion and my right as a citizen to speak freely, but I do by day work for the United States Census Bureau as a partnership coordinator for the state of Maryland. In my role, I have to come up with strategies to try to get populations that often do not respond to the census to figure out why it means something to them and get them activated. And the main strategy is trusted voices, right? I got to figure out who the trusted voices in the communities that don't respond are and get them to trust me because there's a trust gap, and get them to filter the information to their community like, hey, this is important, this is why. So,
Okay, good. I like that.
okay.
I want to get back to that.
Okay.
So can you tell us what made you get into, like, why did you choose this profession?
Man, so I think, you know, the profession chose me.
Okay.
So 10 years ago, I'm about to be 35 tomorrow.
Happy birthday.
I was in grad school, Bowie State, HBCU, the
Okay.
illustrious and historic Bowie State, founded in 1865. And I was studying human resource development. And my whole goal was, how do we reinvigorate a population that's forgotten? At the time, I thought education would save the world. So I said, you know what, I'm going to go to school to be an educator. Or I could train educators to be better, because there was this cultural incompetence, right? Like they don't understand our communities. So I was like, we can train people better to facilitate and teach our children. So I tried that, and I realized the classroom and everything systematically is tough, right? It's tough to fight that battle. And then I decided that minority businesses needed to grow. So I was like, you know what? We need businesses. We need money. That's what we need to tackle. So I worked at the Minority Business Development Agency after being a professor at Morgan State. So different world, Dwayne. I taught college, freshman seminar. I did retention data until I realized I need to go a different angle. And one of my students actually asked me, Mr. J, you talking to us about business, right? I was teaching the School of Business, but have you ever built a business? And I realized a fundamental flaw of education. We're teaching people things we've never done. So I was like, you know what? True.
Yes.
So I still wasn't ready to be an entrepreneur, so I decided I could be an advocate for business. So I joined an agency the only federal agency that's been federally mandated to advocate for minority businesses, Minority Business Development Agency, not SBA. And they worked with the growth and development, so access to capital markets for minority businesses. So I worked there, and I was like, bet, here I am. And then I realized it's more than just access to capital, right? Financial literacy is not good in our communities. Wealth takes a long time to build, and the way we're growing, we got to then look at it differently. So I said it's a policy issue. There
Right.
it is. Aha. And then guy was like, go to law school. I said, yo, I can never be a lawyer. Like, I never wanted to go to school, and I didn't trust anything in legal enforcement. So I went to law school, and while I was there, I stumbled into this role with the census where my supervisor was like, you're a really good hype man at programs that people need to pay attention to. People need to pay attention to the census. Apply and see if they, I was like, they're not going to hire me. A work at home position. I don't even look like I work at work. and I got the position, and it's been the best thing ever because I didn't know anything about the census 10 years ago.
Okay.
So now advocacy, numbers, data, everything that I loved from the past is coming together in this one job. So.
Yeah, I was telling Julius that I've never received the census. I mean, I've never seen the form.
Okay.
But, that's another thing.
And so interesting thing you say that. In my role, we say that the form has to be sent to you, right? So the way the process works is even before we start counting, so it's only every 10 years, 10. That's why it's decennial census. So every 10 years, as in 2010, you got a form. But in order for you to get the form, the city, the state had to say there's an address here. If you lived on campus, if you're a renter, you might have not received the form, right? Because a lot of us, those places that are supposed to receive the form might not have. So
Right.
in my job today, I realized there's a lot of people who've actually never touched it. To your point, I have never received a form.
Right.
Right. And so I'm saying this. So sometimes I go to rooms and people are like, you know what? The people that don't fill it out are low income people of color who are not educated. I was like, actually, I was in grad school.
Right.
Right. Like,
Right.
I
was in the military.
right. And shout out. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
So part of the thing that I'm doing in my job, advocacy looks like being in a room to say, you know what? That's not true. It's not an education thing. It's not an income thing. Maybe we're not doing the right job as government to get to the people, right?
Right.
And then it's hard for them to be like, they're just like, oh, he got us, right? So in my job is often a two-pronged thing. How do we strategize to make sure that if you're a renter, if you're a college student, that you actually know that this matters to you? This is not your parents are gonna fill you out, right? This isn't I'm a renter. I don't care about anything.
So, okay, the census is every 10 years. Why is it every 10 years? Like, I mean, it's the United States. 10 years? That's a long time.
That's facts. So constitutionally, right? It was constitutionally mandated, and they passed a law 1790 that they said it's every 10 years, right? So it's legal.
1790.
Facts. But between the 10 years, we still do a lot of different surveys. So
Okay.
the area community survey is a random population sampling that where we actually keep up with the census and the population and communities. There's a business survey where we actually do the same thing for the businesses. That's every 5 years, I believe.
Okay.
So we're gathering data, but the reason why it's every 10 years, the law said in order for us to be able to determine how to allocate federal dollars to states, we'll do it every 10 years. And based on that count, we'll put all the money to states. So if you're thinking roads, schools, hospitals, anything you can think of that is federally funded is based on census data. And
So yeah, so not only those programs, but you have programs like SNAP
Yep.
and CHIP
Yep.
and Head Start and the school lunch program
Talk
that
about
are
it.
all funded by
The census.
right? Well, from data by the of the
Absolutely.
census. And so when we know this, and you have policymakers or people who are in authority saying that there are minorities who are not filling out this this form, like, what does that mean for us? Why is this important? Like, and how are they generating this narrative? You know what I mean?
So one, the narrative is generated because it's true, right? So in 2010, you can go right now, census.gov/ROAM, Rome, and put in your zip code, right? It'll tell you right now the predicted low response score because we know from 2010 the communities that did not respond are most likely not to respond. In some of our communities, it's about 30% of the people were undercounted, which is crazy, right? Dollars and cents. State of Maryland, that was about $1,800 per person,
Okay.
right?
And do you think? Yes, I'm listening.
And so, boom. So to answer your question about what that really means to us, like directly, think about what $18,000 can do over 10 years per person. And you put it in context of Head Start, Early Start. That means all that money that should have gone to early childhood education didn't come because the federal government is like, hey, y'all didn't count the kids, so we can't give you money for the kids, right? Y'all didn't properly allocate the people in that community, so we can't give you more teachers, right? You guys did not properly budget the population living in that community, so we can't fix the roads because there's not a justification for the many people driving up and down.
That's crazy.
And that's because so it's a self-response form. I digress. We can't make people respond. So essentially it's on the people to respond. And if they don't respond, they're essentially like being like, yo, we don't want this money.
Yeah, but how will people know to respond to a form that, number one, they're not getting, okay? And number two, they don't know why it's being sent to them. Like, people don't know about the census.
Facts. Facts.
And then you were saying earlier about how you are supposed to educate people on something that, people who don't trust you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for a minute. Like, let's unpack that. Why are who's not trusting you? Who's not, and why are we not receiving these forms?
Okay.
And you know,
So, and I know in our pre-call we talked about solutions, so we'll get to solutions.
we'll
But
get to solutions.
if I'm gonna be real, there's a historical distrust for government because the government has not always done right by specific populations. Boom, I said it. And the same communities are like, hey, we've trusted you before, and it's been broken. So why should I trust you now? You know, Eddie Murphy says, "What have you done for me lately?"
Yeah. Right.
Right. But in terms of how we're counteracting that as a federal government, since 2010, we confronted that heavily. So this 2020 is actually good news. It's going online. For the first time ever, you'll be able to fill it out online, over the phone, in the paper form if it comes to you.
Okay.
Let's say if it doesn't. You can
Okay.
go online right now, well, not right now, March 15th, and fill it out online, which means if you have a phone, if you're sitting at home and you're like, yo, I want to make sure we get counted, you can go online. You don't have to wait for the paper form. You can go on the phone if you don't trust online anything, and it's in 13 languages. First time ever. I know people are wondering, why did it take this long
For it to get digitized, right?
and for it to be in 13 languages? I can't speculate on that, but I can say we're here, and this is actually exciting. So it's easier, it's safe, and it's more secure than ever. But most people don't believe me when I say that in most rooms, right? Like it's in Title 13, for the people who are Googling things, says that when we take your information, we can't share it with any law enforcement agency. Not CIA, not FBI, not IRS. That's actually what people are scared of. They're like, okay, y'all gonna use our data.
Okay, with law enforcement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, because people knock on your door. They say with the government, they're like, "Yo, I'm not
I didn't
giving
do
you
anything wrong, you know, and you don't need to know any of my business.
And then a lot of times we're like, okay, we are government, but we're not law enforcement. But that
Right.
distinction in just regular communities, right? Because the same way
Yeah.
you fill out anything, let's say you are using food stamps, or you're using some of these federal services. That form is based on accuracy, and it can be taken away from you based on accuracy. Yet, and then we come in like, hey, you can trust us to put the accurate data. I know you didn't accurately say who's living in that house, but trust us, even though we're government, but we're not them.
Yeah.
That's a hard sell.
Right.
And so the goal of conversations like this is y'all need to really research this and realize that I'm not selling a dream. Like, if we do not respond, we can see what happens to our community every 10 years.
So, I had another question for you. So, okay. So we know that people in our communities don't trust the government, so they're not filling out the form, or they may not even be receiving the forms.
Yeah.
Now that it's going online,
Boom.
and if we see, you know, people who were not historically filling out the form now, like, what does that mean for us? Like, why is that important?
So it goes back to needs. I always ask people, what in your community is lacking right now? Right? People go off. Like,
Yeah.
so people, I'm like, will you vote? I don't know. Will you
Right.
fill out census? I don't know. Tell me where it hurts in your community. They go ham, and I'm like, those exact pain points can be resolved by a proper count in your community. And if you don't see that correlation, you're gonna be mad after the census is done, because it's only March until July.
Okay.
It's done. There's no redo.
Oh.
So that data, once in, is going to determine the funding for your community for 10 years. What happens with us is,
For 10 years.
what happens is like 2021, we get mad. We're not getting enough money. 2022, we even more mad because we're watching how the community is getting money. 2025, we're like, you know what? This is unfair. We need to elect the right people. And the reality is, the number's not going to change.
But is that really the only reason why our communities are underfunded?
It is a big reason. I think it is one of, well, no.
Okay.
Because there's a two-pronged thing. So let's say people are counted. The money comes for these services. We still have to advocate for them. So if there's money for early Head Start, then now we can tell the school district we need more after-school programs, right? So it's not enough to just get counted. You're right. We now need the second part where now we have to know our rights as citizens, meaning, and for the record, for the Census Bureau, you don't have to be a citizen to fill it out, but
Okay. I'm glad you said that because I wanted to
You
get into
better
that in new news.
okay, new news. But I think that's where it comes down to. We have to learn how to advocate for the thing. So a lot of times we elect people, fill out taxes, and let's say we fill out our census. The way we can be empowered now, we can go to elected officials like, you know what, we were counted this time for the census. You said you were going to fix this thing, and there's money in the budget for that. Put it to that one thing. A lot of times we don't advocate directly, one, because usually there's no money. And then we're like, show us where the money is. And then politician is like, I ain't got the money. right? But now if we do fill it out, we can actually now attack it from there's money, there's people advocating for us, because one of the things the census does, it determines how many people represent you in Congress,
Right.
right? So representation is dependent on census. So the more people that counted, the more representation you'll have, and we
Yep.
can vote more people in that represent our community. And now we can then say, you represent us, there's money in the budget, put it to fix these needs. Right now, I think a lot of that is broken.
Right.
So that part.
No, we're listening. The good people of the Motive Zone are listening. Yeah, so we're actually gonna go into new news because I wanted to talk about this article that I read.
Okay.
Thanks. So there was an article that said what's at stake and why now is the time to fill out the 2020 census. Why is now so important? And I know that you touched on that a little bit, but I also wanted to touch on, because you mentioned some changes, which were that the census was going to be online now. It's going to be digitized. But it says, this article says, and I'm going to quote it, it says, with a dramatically reduced budget, a new system for categorizing race, an unprecedented proposal to count only American citizens, and a move to all digital implementation. This is a little old, but the plan for the 2020 census has many policymakers and close observers deeply concerned. And it says changes like these, combined with the charged political climate around immigrants and race, could ultimately result in a deeply flawed count. And
Facts.
Okay, so you said that, you don't have to be an American citizen, but there's a proposal right now, or there was a proposal.
So-
there was a, Trump was going to put it on the, yeah.
So thank you for this, because
Okay.
I always love this question. One, the Census Bureau as an agency is nonpartisan, apolitical.
Okay.
So if you remember nothing else, remember that. So you'll hear a lot about the political climate, but we as a Census Bureau are sworn in to be apolitical and nonpartisan. So there's that. This administration did put a proposal to add the citizenship question on the census form.
Has that been done?
It was proposed. It was put on there.
Okay.
It was fought through the Supreme Court. So it went all the way up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court decided that there was not enough justification to
Okay.
put that on the form. But during that time, we lost a lot of ground with communities that we need to fill this out, right? It came down, and we decided we're not going to print it with the form, right? Boom. So the current form does not have the citizenship question. You do not need to be a citizen to fill it out. But a lot of people still don't believe that. People are still really angry at this attempt to add this question and further undermine the process. But the reality is, July 1st, we decided we're going to print it out without the question. In my role, I often have to walk into rooms to be like, we're past that. Now, how do we build trust back? Because these same communities, you need to fill this out. These services that you use, whether it's English as a second language or anything, it doesn't benefit you to be mad and not respond, right? It's actually going to hurt your community more. And the question is not on there anymore. But
The good thing is that it's digitized, because now we don't have the excuse that we didn't receive it, or
That
someone
part.
didn't knock on our door,
That part.
because there's a reason to fill it out now.
And I want everybody to say that again. Going online is probably the best thing that could have happened,
Right.
because I live in Baltimore City.
That's right.
And right now, if you knock on my door, I'm not going to open it. Homie, don't play that.
Right.
And-
I didn't have company. I didn't have company coming today.
That part. But I know I'll be more inclined to fill it out online.
Right.
Right. And I think that is going to be the turning point for a lot of these communities that feel like they don't want to deal with somebody knocking on the door, asking them for information. But even with that, I always tell people, know your rights. There's things that a census person will never ask you. And I think there's an information gap there too. So a lot of times, my big concern is the communities that are most at risk for predatory fishing, predatory mailings, are also going to be a risk when it comes to the census. So we do a lot of workshops in my role to be like, Census Bureau will never ask you for a social security number, right? It's going to be .gov, not .com, right? So there's going to be a lot of people trying to take information from the most vulnerable populations, and we should be scared, but empowered to be like, you know what, I need to get my information up. So now I can talk to my community about what to expect. And so when they fill it out, it's not like I filled it out and I just lost my whole identity.
Right.
Because we don't want that to happen. So even if for the online presence, we have to educate people what it means to fill it out online. That it's only 10 questions. That they will not ask certain things. That people knocking at your door have to have a badge. You don't have to let them in. You don't have to respond, right?
Yeah, and so, and just being,
To the people at the door, but you have to respond online.
you do.
Yeah, it's constitutionally mandated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So here's the thing.
Okay.
I can understand why people wouldn't want to trust the government, to fill out the form or whatever, because it's like, well, at the end of the day, how can I be sure that now that we filled it out and that we're here, that we're going to get allocated the funding? Like, how do I know that? Because, how does that work? You have these politicians and these, people in Congress. So it still can. I feel like as if the funds can still be allocated incorrectly, even if we fill out the Census Bureau forms. Like, how can we ensure that the funds are being allocated properly to the right programs and also to the right communities? And
so that's a state question. But in terms of the federal government role, we've already determined it's going to be $675 billion every year allocated to states. That number is already determined based on the population count. So it'll be like literally, if there's this many people, we're going to divvy it up. We're going to cut it up. With that process, how it gets to the states, there's actually no misappropriation element there, other than the fact that that number doesn't change. So if this community does not respond in full, it's going to go somewhere else. But that's not because somebody's doing anything wrong. That's because that community did not respond. There's no justification to put any money there. So let's say we all fill it out, then it's going to be an equal disbursement of $675 billion a year to states for the services that they need.
Based on the data from the census.
But now to your point, the second part for people on the ground, now you have to keep your states accountable. Because once it touches a state, then that's a different question.
See, this is what Kevin and I talk about all the time. We talk about how it's important to know who your government officials are.
Exactly.
From the ground up. You got your lawyers. You got your judges. You got your congressmen and your committee people and all of that. You need to know who these people are and where the funds are going.
Absolutely.
For your wards, for every part of your community.
It's civic engagement.
Civic engagement. There we go.
Because you have to know what you are entitled to as a resident.
Know your rights. And that's what I was talking about in the motive of the day. You need to know what your rights are. You need to know what's going on in your communities so that you are able to assert yourself in a way that is going to not only help you and your family, but help the communities and bridge the gap so that these funds that are actually meant for you are really getting to you. And
you have power, right? So when you approach your elected official and you said, I filled out the census and I paid my taxes and I'm a voter,
right.
They have to listen to you.
This is my right.
But if you don't vote, they're like, I'm not scared of you right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And I have a question from Kevin, and I don't know if this is something that you can answer.
Come on, let's go.
Hi, Kevin. We miss you. So he says, Black conservatives say that because the Hispanic population is becoming a major demographic in the U.S., bypassing the African-American population, our vote on issues concerning social programming and immigration reform for newly undocumented populations coming in matters greatly. And what is your opinion on that?
So that's an interesting conversation in general. So it's been estimated that we're about to enter into a majority-minority nation by, I think, 2025.
Okay.
Right. And a lot of the numbers are being based on the growing Hispanic populations.
Right.
And so there's a lot of policy being put for that community, which is a good thing. But if we were to look at it objectively, I think I can make the case that African-American communities are growing at the same rate. The problem is we're not filling out the census. We're not being allocated. So a lot of times when policy is being created, it's almost like we don't need to have protections like other populations. And then we don't advocate for that. And then we don't figure out narratives or ways to make that a case, using even just population as an example. So,
Okay. So, and then I also read and I was watching another podcast where it was saying like Latin, a lot of people in the Latin populations are filling out the form as white or Caucasian. Have you seen that a lot?
That is actually 100% true.
Wow.
There's specific groups where, and it's a cultural thing.
Okay.
So if I'm, Puerto Rico, there's still a hierarchy of how people perceive race. So when you come to this country, and for the record, born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya, I'm speaking about immigrants because I am an immigrant, right? So a lot of times you come here and you want to be American. And this form actually allows you to self-respond. So whatever you check is how you're going to be identified. So people think if I check myself as this population, I'll be able to move and have these same rights, right? Because it makes sense logically. And my official answer is that there's no right or wrong. Like, we can't make you check anything.
Right.
Another interesting question that comes up is gender is still binary, but whatever you identify as, that's what you check. If you don't want
That's
to,
right.
if you don't identify as either, maybe don't fill it out. I'm not saying don't fill it out, but there's you don't have to self indicate something you don't feel like. But yeah, there's a lot of, not misinformation, but a lot of groups from specific communities do identify as white even if they're not.
So why does gender matter on the form?
It's just part of the 10 questions. The official answer is, if you're going to allocate services, let's say we need to know how many women are in our community because women will use different services.
Right. Okay. So
Right,
like
so-
Planned Parenthoods and then stuff. Well, yeah.
Yeah, so it actually, the more accurate you fill out the form, the more accurately services will be pinpointed to your community, right? So that's what we want to see, accurate filling out. So let's say if I am immigrant population and I'm Kenyan, which I am, born and raised in Nairobi, Kenya. I want to indicate that I'm Kenyan because in the school district that I'm in, they might actually now consider putting Swahili as a language,
See.
right? But if I never indicate where I'm from, I'll just say, I'm black, which I am. Some of the things that I might need to feel that I am culturally included in this society won't ever be there. So where I was like, oh, we're not culturally included. Well, let's look at how you filled out the census.
Yeah, and cultural inclusion, that also encompasses economic inclusion.
Yep.
And so if we're not being allocated the funding that we are entitled to based off of just us being here and we built this country, that's why filling out the census is important, because basically we are taking a stand and saying, listen, if I don't get anything else, I'm going to make sure that my community is funded correctly.
I count, and I want my community count.
Right.
It's that simple. Like,
Right.
I count.
Right.
Count me in, America.
Right. And America is so good at counting us out, right?
And for this form, we count ourselves out.
That's
right?
true.
So historically, that's the case, but based on the distrust for government that is, once again, valid.
Well, I just feel like times are changing. So I don't feel like it's only because we're not filling out the form. I feel like it has been systemically, like we haven't been receiving the forms. People have not been coming to our neighborhoods to knock on the door and let us know that it's time to fill out the census. So times are changing, and I feel like because the times are changing, like I feel like it's kind of putting a highlight on the government, like, okay, we are holding you accountable. You can't say that we're not filling out the form if we don't know anything about it, because we are in a digital era.
Facts.
And so now I feel like 2020 going forward, it's time to show and prove how these funds are going to be allocated if people actually step up and fill out the form. And going forward, it's like we're paying it forward to kind of combat all of the distrust that we've had over the years and all of the lack of participation that we've had over the years. And we're going to have to move forward and do more to position ourselves in a way that, we are included.
And so I love that. And my grandfather always says people build houses with walls to keep out the noise from outside. And our goal should be inside the house. And I'm not talking about house Negro mentality. I'm saying part of this problem is we get really angry outside, but we're not at the table at the conversation. So we can't expect people who don't live in our communities to often understand the needs of our communities.
Right.
So we have to take these jobs, right? We have to step into these spaces. We have to apply for a government job. We have to, for the record, census is hiring. We're looking for enumerators, area regional managers. census2020.gov/jobs. Apply for these jobs. So instead of saying the people are not knocking into my door, knock on your door, knock in your community, right? Like part of being activated is, you know what, let's take on this work. You said that 9 to 5 model. I don't feel like I'm living in my passion. If your passion is you get really angry when things are not done in your community, figure out how to get into a role that allows you to do that.
Solutions.
Right?
Solutions. Yes.
And then we can get mad differently.
Yeah.
We can get mad with action.
I agree. I think that it's so important that I think that we are in an era where we're in a selfish era. I don't know if Kevin and I spoke about this last week, but I feel it sounds familiar. But anyway, I just feel like we're just in a very selfish era.
Yeah.
We think that if we don't participate or we do participate, like that's just our prerogative. And it is. It is.
Prerogative.
You're right. It is. We don't have to.
Yeah.
Because nothing has been working, as far as like government, like you said, there's no trust. And if narrow or our perception is nothing has been working for us thus far.
So why now?
So why should I participate? Why should I fill out a census? Even if, it's not going to take too much of my time. Why should I vote? Because we feel like at the end of the day, we have the right to be selfish. But while I agree with that, I feel like we have to do what our ancestors did. They knew that a lot of the everything, the resources, the funding, the inclusion was not going to occur in their lifetime. So what they did, they fought, they marched, they did whatever they had to do to ensure that our generation has it. And so now it is our responsibility to take care of the financial literacy issues in our communities, to take care of the literacy issues in our communities, to ensure that our schools are being funded, to ensure that schools are being they have the resources that they need. Kids are able to get lunch. You know what I mean? Like, these things are important. The only way that we can ensure that we are not a part of the problem is that we're a part of the solution in small ways that don't seem like a big deal to you. I don't, this about me. I'm a volunteer for court-appointed special advocates for children in foster care.
That's how we met.
Yeah, exactly. I forgot to mention that. Goodness gracious. I didn't even say how we met, but we can go back to that. So I'm a volunteer with CASA, and, children in foster care are they're a part of the abused and neglected group, and they're also a part of the dismissed group. I also volunteer for Reading Partners, and I teach children reading comprehension. Why? Because our neighborhoods, we happen to have the lowest literacy rates. Why?
And I love that because I love CASA, right? And I love anything literacy, but a lot of times we fail to realize that these programs, some of them are funded by federals, right? So in order for them to be even boosted, right, we literally say foster care system is broken.
Oh my gosh.
These kids are packed in rooms, but the reality is we're not actually counting foster care populations. We're not counting some of these kids.
Because they're in foster care, who's going to fill out the census form?
Somebody should. So when we start talking about the census and you in your role, you have to be like, wow, in every room I'm in order for this thing to actually be more effective, it might actually come down to the census.
Right.
So now you can go back to CASA and be like, how are we counting foster care populations? Right? Because in order for us to actually give them the proper services that they need, because they need them.
They do.
And the system is broken, how do we get more funding here? Right? And it's interesting. A lot of us do the work. And I volunteer all the time too, but it took me a really long time to see that causal nexus. Like, in order for us to even boost these programs, we might actually have to count people to get the money to increase the funding to do this work. So
yeah, in order to get out of this matrix, we have to put in the work, okay? Yeah. We have to really take a stand and say, you know what, this is mine.
And I'm the one we've been waiting for, right? Neo.
Right.
Neo just woke up.
Right.
I'm the one. I'm Neo.
Right.
I know Kung Fu, right?
Exactly. So, but yeah, I get it. I understand. And as a matter of fact, like I said, I came in here to learn, just like the rest of the Motor Zone fans, about the census and why it's important and why it's important now.
And I wanted to point out one other thing in terms of census, the part that people don't talk about. So there's a lot of tools that are free for the census. One of them is Census Business Builder, right? So based on the census data, based on the Census Business Survey, you can go online right now. It's a free tool. You can say, I want to build a business. anything you can think of, and you could type it up and it'll tell you in your community how many businesses of that type are there, and kind of like guide you through a business case. Why not I should open a business in my area? I know a lot of young entrepreneurs who are paying numbers to get this business advice, and a lot of times it's free information that we don't access, but everybody else is accessing this, right? Walmart determines where they put their locations based on population. They come to the
that's
census.
right.
So we're always like, why don't they bring these businesses into our community? Y'all weren't counted. And they're using the data, which you can use too. They're going to Census Business Building, and it's telling them that's not a good investment to put that business there. So even the infrastructure development in your community comes from the census, but you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you that. You have access to the same tools, right? Come up with how you can build businesses in your own community. Create a business case based on census data if you're accurately counted. So it's more to it than just counting and services. It's business, it's infrastructure, it's free data. It's because data is a new currency. How do you even flip that data to get that funding? Because all grant funding is based on how they tell the story of the census and how it's going to impact communities. So it's bigger than it looks like on the outside. So
Yeah.
yeah,
So the moral of the story is
fill the census.
fill out the 2020 census.
Get counted, get your community counted, and once you do that, make sure everybody on your block, in your community, at your whatever place of worship is, like tell everybody.
Yeah,
between
in
now
the
and
same
March
way that
15th.
people, listen, in the same ways that people rally
Yep.
to get people to vote or to register to vote is the same way that people can rally to get people to fill out 10 questions. 10 questions is actually a faster form than the voter registration or to
Absolutely.
vote. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's
And
less
honestly,
time consuming.
and with this, so you asked the question, why is this census more important than others? We're actually smack dab in election season, so this is being done during one of the most contentious voting cycles ever. Meaning they're going to be campaigning hard. It's going to get lost that the census is important, and that's why we have to hit hard. So the education campaign for us has to hit before December, we're in October, because come March, April, May, you're going to be hearing everything but the census, and you can tell people you heard it from us that the census matters. So we're coming to our census.
We're coming to our census in 2020.
There it is.
And moving right along to For Our People.
For our people.
Thank you, PJ. Last week or a couple of weeks ago, Representative Cummings.
Congressman Elijah Cummings passed. He actually attended my church. His funeral was held last Friday. And
Did you go to the services?
I was not able to attend. I watched it online because you can do things online. But in terms of what's next for us as a community, once we get the information up, it's figuring out who's got next, right? We're losing a lot of great people, and we got to step up. And moment of silence for Elijah Cummings. Thank you. So he is a wonderful example. Born and raised in Baltimore City. Went to school out there, but he went to, as far as law school, in a time when going to law school as a black man was not a thing. Climbed all the way up and held one of the most amazing seats. He was the chairman. So he was the chairman of his committee. And he was very vocal about everything. Faith, what is not being done. He actually was, for the record, Census Bureau is apolitical, nonpartisan, but he signed impeachment letters on his deathbed. So when we talk about for the people,
Talking about our elders and our ancestors and basically taking the torch.
it's now.
He passed the baton.
It's us, and it's now, right?
Right.
And we don't have to wait until people pass us do this work.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot of times in terms of transitioning 10 years, we watch people pass, movements die, people stop marching, and it almost looks like, okay, so what's next? And honestly, we got to wake up. Right. And
We
so
have
for
to
you,
wake up as a collective. We have to unify and wake up and really start
Yeah.
taking action in our communities, not even for other people in our communities, but for ourselves.
yep.
Because when you do things for other people and you do things for your community, you are essentially doing it also for yourself. You are living with purpose. You are taking your power back. You are thriving in your power and in your purpose. And so, if there's anything that we can learn from his passing, is that we have to really take the bull by the horns and do something, even if it's a small thing, like filling out the census.
Absolutely, and you need, now I got to go to church on him. So we gotta
Go
end.
to church.
So Moses passed away before Joshua took over, right? And he passed away before they got to the promised land. We're done wandering in the wilderness. I think it's time for us to get to this promise. So Joshua generation, which is us, it's time for us to get there.
That's right.
But it looks like work, and when we get to
It
the
looks
promise,
like work. And you know what? They always
Come on.
listen. The generation before us is always talking about us millennials about how we don't want to work. Well, I don't know. I feel like we're doing a lot of the work.
and that's straight scripture. When they got to the promise, they had to see, plant, and harvest. So
That's right.
young folk,
That's right. The young people.
It's
and
time
so
to go to
and
work.
so it is our responsibility to train up the young people that come behind
and
us.
see, plant, harvest.
Yes.
Right? What seeds are we planting?
Right.
Right. And what is the harvest?
What seeds are we planting? So it's like, what seeds are we planting for ourselves?
Come on.
What seeds are we planting for the children that come behind, the generation behind us? What seeds are we planting for our children, our cousins, our nieces, our nephews? Like what seeds are we planting?
And that looks like financial literacy. That looks like equity. That looks like breaking generational curses. That looks like dealing with mental health through these services we gonna get from filling out the census.
That's right. That deals with like you said,
Yeah.
funding literacy programs. And who said this? It was Byron Kelly. There are more dog shelters than there are homeless shelters. Why is that? Why we don't have funds? And DC and Baltimore, we see in New York. I'm from New York, you know that, and you see a lot
Dog
of
parks.
Dog parks. Like, how do
we're
you have so
counting the
many dog
dogs.
parks,
Come on,
but you
yo.
don't have enough? You don't have enough food to feed the homeless people. Why are children starving? Why kids can't get free school lunch?
Go off.
Why don't they have books in school? Like, that's crazy to me.
Culturally relevant books that deal to people like us. Yes. Why? And then we get mad at our students for leaving the classroom when it's not even applying to them.
It's not applying to
And we
they're
call
not
it
learning
truancy, and then
anything.
you know what?
Yes,
That's-
and then
on the next show, we're going to talk about the school to prison pipeline
The
and how we
school
need
to
to
prison
educate
pipeline.
our children in a way that keeps them activated in their purpose.
Right. But continuing on with For Our People, I don't know, some of you may know that Kevin and I, we went to a talk at Howard University right across the street.
HU?
Yes. And Marianne Williamson was there. You know, I'm a big fan, and I'm definitely supporting the campaign. But this is a bipartisan thing right here. That's me and Kevin. Marianne showed us a lot of love at the Howard University talk.
Yep.
I just lost
Yep.
my train of thought looking at the picture. But one of the things that I found very profound, what she said, is that love is a revolution.
Ooh.
And she said, love is the greatest revolutionary force. That's what she said. And so why is that important? When people think about love, people attest it to like familial love, romantic love, but love is about really, like we were just talking about, love is an action. Love, you know what I mean? Love is a verb. It's about putting energy and goodness out into the world.
Come on.
And so whether it's trying to, build up our communities or listening to a talk by somebody who I personally am, passionate about, Marianne Williamson, about how we need to revolutionize not only our government, our policies, but our communities, through our loving actions and really trying to do something different.
Come on.
Do something more than what we've seen for the last 100 years.
And if we're not driven by love, we're driven by fear.
We're driven by fear.
And she said our biggest
And love
fear,
casts out, yes, come on now.
our biggest fear is not that we are,
Inadequate.
is that we are powerful beyond measure. So you have
It
to
is our
now
light,
do
not our
that heart
darkness
check. What
that
is
frightens us.
driving you?
That's right.
Is it fear or love?
Right, and love casts out all fear. Fear
Come
is
on.
not even real.
Come on,
Fear
church.
is an illusion. So, I think that people, like we were talking about, people are afraid of, what these forms mean and what these government agencies' involvement in our lives mean. But, that's what I'm saying. We have to take back the control.
And repurpose it into love. So
And
now how do
repurpose
I
it into
move
love.
with love instead of like, I'm afraid of what.
Afraid
love.
of what's to come or what this looks like or what, we have to really operate in a place of, like we just said, love.
Love is a new revolution.
Love is the
And this revolution will be televised.
Yes.
It will be televised.
So, yes, it will be televised. So I just want to give 2 shout outs. I want to give a shout out to Helene Flowers because he just created some T-shirts. He's distributing some T-shirts that have love as a revolution on them, which I thought was pretty dope because We just had to talk to Marianne, and it was just interesting how synchronicity,
Okay.
love is a revolution. So shout out to him. Go look on his website, Dillionaires and Helene Flowers. But also, what events are coming up this weekend? I don't really know, but I do know.
I was gonna say I want to give a shout out to Kingdom Promo, God
Yes,
First,
God first.
and my homie. Where's my pen? So there's a young man that created a comic book series called Weird Enough, and it's teaching young kids how to battle with depression. So look him up, Weird Enough. He's on Instagram, but this young brother is teaching our kids how to develop a
Yo,
social media avatar to battle depression. So it's powerful.
dope.
I think Tony Weaver is his name.
Dope. And just one more shout out to Tommy Collins Events. He's having a Halloween party for us grown folks
Hey.
on Friday at Po' Boy Gyms on U Street. So if you're out and about, make sure you step in and with a costume and have
And
some
it's my birthday tomorrow, so celebrate. me.
adult fun. Yes, in honor of your birthday.
There it is.
That's right. Thank you all for tuning
Thank
in.
you. This was
Thank
awesome.
you
This
for
was good.
yes. Thank you for coming to
was
shoot
good.
the breeze with me.
This was amazing.
I appreciate you kicking knowledge to the Motive Zone family.
I'm just trying to get them to come to their senses.
Come to the senses. Make sure you check us out on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button. Hit us up on Instagram. And we will see you again next week at 6. Peace.